Hey, podcast listeners, maybe you listen to this show and have thought, hey, I would like to start a podcast too. Or maybe you're already a podcaster or some kind of content creator yourself. For me, when I transitioned from having a weekly or sometimes, if I did not get to it, a monthly blog, when I transitioned from that to a podcast, it was because I was an avid podcast listener, and I still am. It's my favorite way to learn, to laugh, to get a good crime story in, all of it. And if you've ever been curious what it's like behind the scenes of one of my episodes of like literally what I'm doing right now, recording this, then this episode is for you. If you've ever thought like, hey, I want to start a podcast myself, or a YouTube channel, or just start consistently blogging even. Hearing this process, I think will really help you. I'm just going to literally take you behind the scenes of what it's like for me to have the idea all the way to the saved file for a podcast episode. So let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth McCravey, and you're listening to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. Each week, I'll bring you workshop-style trainings that teach you how to stand out online, design success from the inside out, and create a breakthrough business. It's time to turn viewers into raving fans and design the business and life of your dreams. I'm so excited you're here. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. I'm so excited to talk about podcasting today on a podcast, something we haven't talked about here, but feels so fun and very timely as well. So I've had this show over a year now. This is episode 70 that we're recording now, and been able to like consistently do it every week and also consistently have fresh ideas with a primarily solo show. I think I've had at this point maybe 5, maybe 6 interviews, not many, out of 70 total episodes. So like you can imagine, that's a lot of like ideas to come up with and a lot of content to create. So I'm going to talk to you guys about like what that process is like every week when we come out with a new episode and what it's like from the idea to the recorded file. But first, I want to tell you like why this is relevant right now. So yesterday, I released a new type of website template for podcasters, and I'm so excited about this. It has been a long time waiting, really. You guys have asked for it so many times, so I'm so excited it's here. You can find that in my shop. It is linked in the show notes, or you can go to elizabethmccravey.com/shop, and I have the direct link to the podcast template there. So ever since I released this podcast, I've had a series of website pages dedicated to my show. I've had those on my site since day one. And I absolutely don't think you have to have like a podcasting website right when you start your show, but I do think it's helpful. And those pages have served as a place for you guys to know where to leave reviews, how to find out where you can listen, see the top episodes. And then I have private pages for things like guest information that I send to someone who's going to be a guest on this show, media kit, landing pages, all kinds of cool stuff like that. And now I've built the same thing for you guys after many very kind requests for this type of website template. So this is a website that you can use solo on its own or add to your already existing Showit website. And there are a couple variations like with or without a blog, depending on what you need that you can use there. But each one comes with awesome pages like you get a podcast landing page, a media kit page, guest information coming soon, lead magnet pages, and so much more. And then again, you have the option to get with a blog if you need that. Plus, there is a new full site template called the Jenna template that matches this podcast template. So you can get that alone, or if you're like, I want all of it, you can get a giant 17-page website template with the podcasting pages and the normal website pages I typically offer in a template all together. And this is one of the biggest templates, well, really the biggest template I've ever offered. So really, really awesome. So again, you can shop that right now, elizabethmccravey.com/shop, and read the show notes. I have some special details if you're listening to this live about how it just released. So be sure to read that as well. And go shop that. Let me know what you think. Send me a DM on Instagram and let me know what you think of the new templates. So excited about these. But now you see why this topic feels especially relevant today. And I want to dive into it now and tell you guys like what this whole podcasting process is like step by step. And to start, I want to encourage you, if you're not a podcaster, I still want you to listen to this episode because I really do again, I was reading over my outline, which we will talk about, but so much of this is the same type of process you would go through for writing a blog post. It's just going to look a little differently. Same for if you have a YouTube channel or Facebook Live series. I don't know, whatever it is, it can be a really similar process. So I still think you'll be able to get something out of this. And at the end, I'm going to share some super random, seemingly unrelated things I have learned through this experience podcasting when it comes to recording solo. That'll be tips for you for how to do that better. Things, again, I'm still learning, obviously, but some things I feel like I've learned well and would like to share with you. So let's start with the steps. So the first step, when anytime I have a new podcast episode that is a solo one, which again, mostly solo episodes over here. So the first thing is an idea, which again, obvious, but let me explain how that actually plays out. So I keep a rolling list, multiple places with episode ideas. So I first have a document in Google Drive, and we use Google Drive in my business really heavily for literally everything, it seems like. But we have a folder for podcasting. Within that, tons of other folders. And in there's a document that's ideas. And then I even have another folder that's ideas I've kind of started on where they have their own document because I've typed a lot of things into. So I'm always thinking of podcast ideas. And even when I think back to having started this show, I started it with a list of 50 plus topics that I knew I wanted to talk about on the show. So early on, especially, it was there's no problem for me to find an episode topic because I have this giant list, and I've since, deleted stuff from the list as I record it, but I'm always adding to it. So there's really, when we think about a weekly show that's alone, oh my gosh, are you going to run out of content ideas? I know that could be a struggle possibly, but that has not personally been my story. I always end up thinking of something new to talk about, whether it's from you guys asking a question. I'm oh, that would make a great episode idea, or just something I'm implementing and learning from and want to share because of that. So there's always ideas to come by if you're watching for them. And if you're in I'm an educator, content creator mode, you can come up with lots of cool ideas. So sometimes I randomly get struck with an idea, and this is so funny. If you were to be around me on a daily basis, you would see this happen. But I will get an idea, and I'm not at my computer, and I will literally pace around my house and type into the notes app on my phone the idea to get it out of my brain. I just type and type and type, and it's kind of that's the start of my outline. And often when I start an outline, it's from my notes app, and I send it to my laptop, put it in a Google Doc, and then I start on the idea from there. But I get struck by ideas all the time. And so I have multiple notes in my phone on that. Just the ideas come from everywhere. So just always, if you are a podcaster, blogger, anything, if you are creating content, even if you don't have a blog and you're just posting on Instagram, I would encourage you to be on the lookout and have a solid place that when you have an idea for a content piece, that you can throw that idea into it and be able to run with it later and be able to remember all the pieces of it. Because that's one thing I've found is you might think you'll remember it later, but you might actually not. That's what happens to me. So I will actually get out my phone and type stuff in. So every episode starts with an idea. The next step, once I have the idea, I figure out when it's time for me to outline and record an episode, I say which idea am I going to work with? Typically I know that over a week in advance for when I'm going to record. I know here's some episodes I'm going to work on right now. But for every episode, I do an outline in a Google Doc. Again, we use Google Doc for everything. So every episode has its own folder in Google Drive, and then there's documents in it, images, all the media images you see us share go in there, everything. We keep it all in one place. And when I think about outlining, so everyone has a different outlining style, but for me, it's kind of weird, but I tend to write in full sentences when I do outlines, which might seem that's really weird. It kind of feels a little bit more like a script, but you can probably tell right now, even from me talking, I don't sound like I'm reading a script. And I think that's the key to which I'm going to talk about this at the very end, but writing an outline that you do not need to read word for word. So I am writing in full sentences, but I also get off track from the sentences, which is what I'm doing right now. And I do a mix though of sentences and like bullet points, and everything's bullet pointed too. I should say that. Like if you were to see my outline, it's like big points that are bolded, which right now I'm under step 2, outline the episode. And then there's bullet points that are like mostly written in full sentences. So I also would say like when I first start to write the outline, I typically start with a list, and you've probably noticed if you're a regular listener that the solo episodes I do tend to be list-based episodes versus like tons of random big ideas that don't really connect, or even just one big idea. I tend to do, most episodes are a little longer. And so it might be that even if the title doesn't say so, I'm sharing like 5 steps or 3 ways or whatever it is to doing something. So when I first start the outline, I'm going to like have those written out, and then I'm filling in the blanks of like, okay, what do I want to talk about within each of these points? And I really think that is so smart for solo podcasts because it's so much easier to follow when you're just listening to one person talk for, 30 to 45 minutes. If they're going off of like specific points, you're more likely to get something out of it. You're more likely to have action steps after. And it's easier to follow, like more pleasant to listen to. Like I know you guys tell me you find this podcast very bingeable and just like keep listening and you still get action stuff even though you're kind of binging it. I literally had someone tell me that yesterday. And I think that's part of it, is that I'm going off of like particular steps versus just randomly talking about things. So I outline mostly for my own reference while I'm recording, but then also Abby, who if you are a template shop buyer, you've probably emailed with her at some point, but she has customer support and helps manage the podcast. So most of our episodes we turn into a blog post, not all of them, but most of them. And she uses the outline I wrote and listens to the audio in order to write the blog post. So that's something, we're not really talking about the blog writing on this episode, but that's something we do later, and the outline plays a role in that. So my outlines, and again, this might sound crazy, but on a typical episode that you guys hear that's like 45 minutes, that's typically a 10-page outline for me. Like again, because I write a lot of stuff, I'm bullet pointing, so that takes up more space. But yeah, 45 minutes, probably 10 pages. And I don't stick to my outline the whole time. And I'll often think of other things while I'm speaking to share, which gives it a more natural feeling. Again, like I'm not reading word for word, which I'm sure you guys listen to some podcasts, I know I do, where they just read and it's so clear that they're reading a script, and that can feel harder to follow because it's less engaging to listen to. So that's number 2 here. I outline the episode, and for solo episodes, I would say an outline is super, super key to the process. I do not do outlines for interviews because I'm letting that conversation flow more naturally. But when it's just me and I'm turning on my mic, I need to know what I'm going to talk about ahead of time as to not waste your time. Because if I'm just on here talking about nothing, I'm going to waste your time. So interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. information. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. That's number 2, outlining. And for reference, if you want to know like outline links, like this episode outline right now that I have is 4 pages long. And I don't know how long it'll end up being. I'm going to guess, actually. I bet this episode will be like 30 minutes. That's going to be my guess. Yeah, I can usually kind of tell based on the outline length what it'll end up being at this point. Because again, I've done this is my 70th episode. So I've done this quite a few times. Okay. So the third step is recording the episode. So obvious, but I want to kind of walk you through what that looks like for me. So once I have the outline done, I'm ready to record. And sometimes I like to record right after I do the outline. And other times I like to sit with the idea longer and like revisit the outline again before I go to record it. And it really varies so much, but typically if it's a topic that I've been like thinking on for a while, I have the little notes in my phone about it, I'll like record it immediately after because it's like literally something that I'm so familiar with. It's like, okay, I've been thinking about this a while. I've been wanting to do this episode a while. I'm ready to go. But if it's a newer concept, I might wait and add more to the outline later before recording. Cause like I leave my computer where I'd done that outline and I might, go work on something else. And all of a sudden I think of like, oh, that's something really good I should add to that outline before I go to record. So I make sure to give it time to like have all my thoughts in it. So when I record, I do so in my office, not in a closet, which I know is so common. I hear podcasters all the time say they record in their closets or like their laundry room or something like that. And I've never understood why. And because I've never had the like audio problem that causes you to have to be in a closet. So my mic, which is so amazing, I'm going to link to in the show notes for you guys, but I love my mic, but it doesn't pick up background noise at all, at least in my personal opinion, because I never noticed it whenever I re-listened to some episodes. But we also live in a cul-de-sac that's super quiet. And in our neighborhood, which I actually started this podcast though when we lived in an apartment complex, but now for about a year, we've lived in this house. But in our neighborhood, you hit a dead end sign like for a while before you get back to our cove. So there's very little traffic in this part of the subdivision, which keeps it really quiet outside. I do have a neighbor though that also works from home and does a lot of stuff in his garage. He like does woodworking type things. And whenever he's out there working, I cannot record a podcast because they will pick up that. But generally speaking, there's never anyone in our cove. So it's really quiet, which helps. So that's why I've never had to do the like closet thing. I'm actually recording right next to a giant window, just sitting at my desk. So yeah, I record at my desk. I sit down with my mic. And again, I'm going to link to the exact mic I use in the show notes if you're looking for a mic yourself. It's from Amazon, around $75. And I use that with a foam ball microphone windscreen. I use one of those on top of the mic. So total, it's like an $80 purchase. And I actually use just like the basic, came with the original iPhone's Apple headphones to hear myself while I'm recording, which I want to explain why I think that's helpful. But first, why I use these headphones, I actually have purchased recently. I actually still need to return them from Amazon, but I bought some like fancy headphones for podcasting that were more like $100. And I prefer the Apple headphone ones. So that's just like, I'm literally returning them because I was like, I thought these were like, oh, I'll get something nicer, but I like these better. So I use the Apple headphones. I plug them into my laptop and then my mic is also plugged into my laptop. But an interesting thing, I like to hear myself talk while I'm doing solo episodes. So right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm also hearing my voice through the headphones. And that might sound weird. And I know a lot of podcasters, when we do solo stuff, I've heard many people say they don't listen to themselves. It's literally a setting you can do when you're recording so that you hear yourself while you're doing it. But I recently actually heard someone, it's such a great episode on James Wedmore's Mind Your Business podcast. It's actually the episode directly after the episode where I was interviewed. So definitely if you haven't listened to that, go listen to it. It's episode 368 of his podcast. He interviewed me about my last launch. It's a really fun one. But then the episode right after it, 369, is about voice inflection, public speaking. Like they cover so many different things, but he's interviewing Tracy Goodwin, who's like an expert in that kind of stuff. So that's something worth listening to, that episode. But she talks about how when you can hear yourself speaking, you tend to have more enthusiasm and are able to like speak more like yourself. She says it way better than I just said it, but she talks about that on the episode. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because I've always felt more connected to what I'm saying when I'm podcasting if I can hear myself saying it. So anyway, that's what I do. I listen to myself. I use the Apple headphones, and then I use my nice mic, which I'm going to link for you guys. And I'm recording GarageBand. So nothing fancy. That's why I use for solo episodes. It comes on your MacBook, like included if you have any Apple products. And for interviews, I use something else, but I've always liked GarageBand. So it's funny because I want to throw this in there about the recording process. I've had friends ask me, do you take breaks when you're recording on a 1-hour episode, or is it just like straight talking with no breaks for an hour? And I think that's such a funny question. And when you haven't done a podcast before, it makes total sense. But like, yes, I definitely take breaks. Basically, every other podcast you're listening to goes into a post-production process where they're editing out breaks, they're editing out coughs. They might be editing out the guest, the two people, the person they're interviewing and the host talking about something like off the camera, so to speak. So I'll take a break to cough, to regather a thought, to sip some water, all of it. And sometimes I pause myself from recording, and then sometimes I just let it keep going. If I say something wrong and I'm like, oh, I need to restate that, I'll either sometimes edit it out, or I'll say to my amazing podcast editor, I'll say, hey, Natalie, like, can you delete that part and replace it with this next thing? And when Natalie's in the like post-production process, she will edit stuff out that needs to be edited and place things in that need to be placed in and that sort of thing. So there's a lot that happens post-production. No one you're listening to probably, I would imagine, is just recording straight with no breaks. You have to take a pause to have water and all of that stuff. So that's the recording process. And once I'm done recording, I save the file, I export it, I upload it into Google Drive, and we use Basecamp as a team for managing like everything in the business. I also put my clients into Basecamp. So I've tried multiple other platforms, but I've kind of settled into Basecamp at this point. So that's what we use for podcasting. And I will in Basecamp tell Natalie, like on our checklist, like, hey, it's recorded, it's in Google Drive. We have the folder link because we have a to-do list for every single episode that we all three are like working through on. And then Abby and Natalie will go in to doing their parts on working through an episode. So on that note, I do not edit my own episodes, and I'm really grateful for that because I do not like listening to myself. I think I wouldn't enjoy like just listening to myself after I just recorded for say like an hour long or however long, and then have to re-listen to edit it. Like that does not sound fun to me. So I'm really grateful for Natalie that she does all that good stuff post-production. Thank you, Natalie. It's so appreciated. And I would highly recommend if you are starting a podcast, like to get someone to edit it for you. Because podcasting is a ton of time, and it's typically, especially when you start, not a way you're going to be making direct money in your business, possibly never direct money in your business. So having some extra help so you can work on the money making side of your stuff more is really smart. So for me, I did edit the first 3 episodes of this podcast. They all released on the same day when I launched this podcast over a year ago. So I edited all 3 of those myself. And then right now, the current music, intro music you hear when you listen to an episode, I mixed it myself, all of that, as well as the outro music, because I actually do enjoy audio stuff. And I learned a lot about that in college within my major. And at my first job, I did stuff relating to like editing, that sort of thing. But it's not my favorite thing, and I'm not an expert at it. And I think it's better to have someone else do it. So I love having that help from Natalie and help from Abby with all the podcast stuff. So that's something I would recommend. But I do think even on that note, and I've always felt that way about business in general, but that like it's helpful to know how something's done. Like I appreciate it more because I have done it myself on 3 episodes. I remember how long it took and how tedious it felt at times to have to edit myself so much. And Also, as you podcast longer, you will get better at not making mistakes that need to be edited out. So like, I think my first couple episodes are probably harder to edit than like this one will be, for example. So those are the 3 steps of recording an episode for me. And again, I could go a lot longer and walk into like all of our post-production stuff, but I think that's helpful to you as someone who is creating content, creating a podcast, to like think through how this whole thing works. And to close us out, I literally have like how many? 5 random tips I want to tell you guys that are just, again, like I am no expert, but I have been doing a podcast consistently now. So these are some things I've learned that are fresh because again, I have not been doing this for 1,000 years. I really do like, I'm in the trenches with you guys. And so these are some tips I'd have there, things I've learned. So the first thing, talk like you're talking to a friend because you are. And I think a mistake some people make on podcasts is they sound a bit robotic. They might sound like I already mentioned of like you're very obviously reading a script. And again, if you listen to some of my early episodes, I probably sound more intensely like I'm reading a script than I do now. And it's because you get used to it and it takes time. But talk like you're talking to a friend, be personable, and show your personality, whatever that is. Your personality, I know, is probably different than mine, but whatever that looks like for you, letting people get to know you through your voice is so powerful. Podcasting is one of like, in my mind, one of the coolest media platforms because you really are like people are taking you with them into their everyday life, listening to you talk, and it's very intimate learning experience. So I love podcasting, but because of like the way we are talking, I'm in your earbuds with whatever you're doing right now. It's better to talk like you're talking to a friend. And remember that like people are listening to your podcast at the gym, when they're loading dishes, when they're driving, when they're shopping. I literally, every time I go shopping, guys, I put in my AirPods and listen to a podcast. And I know many of you are the same way. So talk like you're talking to a friend. Second tip, know the points you're trying to make before you start recording and keep people on track with the points as you go. So for solo episodes, again, I already said this, but I think point-based concept where there's like, these are 5 things I'm trying to say, or just one thing you're trying to say, whatever it is, those are easier to follow versus like a ton of random, seemingly unrelated ideas. So podcasts should take people on a journey and transformation to a result at the end. And they need to be learning something. Following a system in the way you're talking about it is going to make that a lot easier. Another tip, I kind of already said this one, but don't create notes that you have to really read like intensely to get through. One thing that helps me with that is if it's an outline I wrote a couple days earlier, I literally read the whole outline before I record to jog my memory. That way, when I get to the next thing I wrote, I'm not even really having to read it necessarily. I'm more of just like, oh yeah, I remember writing that. And then I can kind of talk about it. Don't have someone else write your outlines either. That's another random thing. I know there are some shows that do that and you can tell that the person did not write it themselves. People can sense that and it feels hard to listen to, honestly. So that's the one thing, just like figure out for you what makes sense for creating an outline. Like how does that work best for you? Another thing, this is one you'll totally learn as you go, but figure out what time of day you have the most energy and have that be your recording time whenever you have the opportunity to like choose, the optimal time to record. Also pay attention to what your limit is with how many episodes you can do in a day or a week and things like that. Everyone is so different here. I've heard people say that they record like 4 or 5, 6 episodes in a day, and I cannot imagine that. Like I already have a sore throat right now from doing one long meeting right before this and then doing this recording. So I definitely cannot do that many in a day. I think for me, the most episodes I've done in a single day are 3. And that again, like felt like the limit for me. My episodes are also longer. So when I say 3 episodes, that could easily be like 2 to 2.5 hours of recording time. So anyway, figure that out though and see what works for you. For me, I think ideally, if you want like kind of a starting point from my opinion, I like to do probably no more than 2 episodes a day. And I like to record in the mornings. I have the most energy then in general. Right now, I'm recording this at 12 o'clock, 12:15 now, but definitely definitely for me, mornings are better. But figure out what works for you and try to like pay attention to that of how you feel energy wise when you try different times. The last random thing, and again, this relates back to like, go listen to the episode on James's podcast. It's really good. Again, 369, my interview's right before it. So also listen to that one while you're there, but change up your voice inflection as you speak. Monotone talking is a lot harder to like focus on, listen to all of that. So, again, that goes back to talking like you're talking to a friend, but if you're talking to a friend and you're excited about something, you get excited. If you're sad about something, you get sad. However, that was a really bad example, but you know what I mean? Change up your voice inflection as you speak, make it interesting to listen to. And again, I am like no expert at this, but again, been doing this and this is some stuff I've learned. And I actually just thought of a random, like last tip to add. Try to be consistent. And that again can feel really hard, but like dedicate yourself to like, for me, it's every Tuesday. I could have started the show and said I'm doing once a month or every other week. Whatever you want to do though, like pick a day of the week and decide I'm going to release every day on this day or every other week on this day. Like just be consistent, because people who come to love your podcast really will open their podcasting app on that day and see if there's a new episode there. I know I do that for the shows I love. And if it's like sporadically released, it's going to be harder for people to have that consistent following with you. So that's a random final tip. But yeah, so that's the peek into my podcasting process, how I plan, how I outline and record. Again, the steps are simple, but there were so many little tips throughout that. But it starts with the idea, moves to the outline, and then I record the episode. And I want to remind you guys as we close out to go check out the podcasting kit template. Again, I made this like based off of what I've found as a podcaster is a need in a podcasting website. I'm literally making this as a podcaster for you guys as podcasters. So check it out. It has all the pages that you're going to need to like really actively promote your show, to send guest information they need. Definitely look at the guest info page. That's one like worth checking out. And I've based it off of like what I literally use in my business for the interviews I've done. So go check that out, elizabethmccravy.com/shop. These released yesterday, and there's also a new full site template, the Jenna template. So check out both of those. And if you're in the market for a website template, those are going to be awesome for you. And you can always email us, reach out to me on Instagram, anything, chat with us on the website if you have questions about these. And I'm laughing right now because I'm literally like basically exactly on time for what I said. I guess 30 minutes, and I'm like almost at 30 minutes of my recording. So look at that. You learn how long you talk once you do this for a little while. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please share with a friend, leave us a review, and let me know what you think. We so appreciate hearing your feedback. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the podcast this week, friend. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you about something. I would encourage you to check out my website template shop. Over on elizabethmccravy.com, you'll find Show It website templates, and they are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. I don't know, maybe it is, and maybe you don't want to hurt its feelings, but you know it's true. And your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers. And that's what these website templates do on MShop. These are pre-made website templates built for the Show It platform where you can plug and play your content into the template with ease and then get started with a website that is made to actually make you money. Isn't that what we all want, right? So go shop the templates at elizabethmccravy.com/shop. That link is also in the show notes. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate it if you left a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts, or even just share it with a friend. It's a great way to support the show and then give us your feedback. So thanks so much for listening.